So a while back I came up with this theory where I believed that every single season you can get at least one good romance anime. And for a while, that thought actually made sense because every single season you would get at least one good romance anime. And I was on a bit of a roll, but then things kind of changed because last season, So when I came into this season, I was a little less than optimistic because I had heard that there are a lot more romance anime, but after the last season I was a little bit hurt and kind of just looked at each of these anime in a not so optimistic way. But then, after spending some time with these anime, specifically giving them at least 3 episodes, I quickly found out that this season was going to be different because not only did we get 1 good romance anime, not 2, but instead we got 3 good romance anime. There's a 4th, but we don't talk about that one. That was just a train smash. R.I.P. But genuinely, I came to the realization that by the end of this season, each of those 3 anime could easily take the title of being the best romance anime, and that's something I haven't heard of in a minute. So I decided that I'm gonna talk about these anime, give you the good and the bad about them, but ultimately, even though this seems like a list and an order, don't really focus on that. Ultimately, none of them were bad. It's just about your preference as a romance anime fan. Let's just get to it. So for me, my number 1 was My Dress Up Darling. This anime might have not been the romance anime that people wanted, which is weird because I have it as my number 1 at the moment, but it delivered something a bit more different in that aspect, because the thing that always made My Dress Up Darling different is the fact that it incorporated cosplay. That's what makes it different. And you're able to get a dive into the world of cosplay as you see these 2 individuals who are within it but in a kind of different way, but then find themselves in a romantic fashion. And I always used to find that to be really interesting in terms of the anime because that's what made it really different. And this season, in my opinion, really amped that up more. It focused more on the world of cosplay and kind of put the romance on the back burner. And the reason why for me I appreciated this the most, even though I'm looking for a romance anime, is because it allowed for more organic pacing in terms of the anime. The romance wasn't forced, it didn't feel like it had to happen every single episode. It naturally happened. And the thing that for me that I appreciate about certain romance anime is the fact that with certain things like love or just romance, they take time. It's not always a really beeline, straight, fast forward thing. Some things can take days, weeks, months even. And when I watched My Dress Up Darling, I felt their chemistry building, but it felt very organic and felt very real. And for me, I was able to relate to it because you kind of see that in real life more often than what other romance anime would present. And at the same time, besides just building the slow chemistry with the characters, they gave you a beautiful deep dive into cosplay, because there's nothing more fun than watching an anime that's about one thing, but it's also able to teach you about other things as well. You're not solely driven to watch the anime because you just want to focus on romance and romance only. It's good for them to show you other aspects, because when it comes to romance, like with any sort of issue, you don't make your entire life about the romance. It's a part of your life, but not your whole life. And to see these characters have their own lives and their own issues and kind of deal with them in their own sort of way, but then also introduce other topics that are bigger than the idea of just romance, but more focused towards life, made this anime super unique for me and really informative and fun. But with this anime, it felt more normal. It felt like you were learning with these characters, and it wasn't like a lesson, but more of a casual conversation that afterwards you could kind of digest and think about on your own, and I appreciated that. But then in terms of the negatives for this anime, my biggest negative about this anime was the fact that sometimes maybe they would focus a little too much on the idea of cosplay. Some days I just felt like they couldn't really balance it as best as they could, and sometimes you'd almost seem like the anime would forget that it's a romance anime. But the biggest one for me was that they're in high school. I couldn't really relate to that, and sometimes I'd kind of be a little uncomfortable. I'm not in high school. So that was the biggest negative that this anime had. But if you were looking for an experience that was very sort of unique, informative, and very distinct, I think that season 2 of My Dress Up Darling is something that you should check if you haven't watched it. If you have, you might get what I'm saying. Now number 2. Number 2 for me is Rascal Does Not Dream of Santa Claus, or Bunny Girl Senpai, or depending on what people want to call it, because it's really hard to find people who talk about this anime, because in terms of what this anime offered, it offered something a little bit more different. First of all, thank goodness they were in varsity, so I could kind of relate. They were adults, so that's kind of cool. But in terms of just the topics that were discussed, this is another anime that has the idea of romance within it, but it has this bigger idea, and that's the puberty syndrome. And the thing is, when you watch this anime initially, it's a very slow burn because it becomes information overload a lot, especially depending on if you've watched the movies or not. It can sometimes just feel like they're throwing a bunch of information to you.
Okay.
But once it clicks, and I think for me it clicked after episode 4, because not only was it able to juggle the pitfalls of a relationship with these two characters, it also then dealt with some topics that you kind of could correlate to romance, but also to yourself. And for me, I love something that's going to be able to empower you, but also teach you. But ultimately there's other issues and things that are going to happen with you that you kind of need help with. But it can also be happening at the same time while you're in a romantic situation, or whether you're not, or whether you're looking for one. There's a bunch of things. And to see that puberty syndrome have certain moments in which it affected characters, like a certain character who's obsessed with being liked by everyone, versus another character who can't be seen but is in love with someone but just witnessed that person, not even remember them. And that's this sort of spot that Rascal, I'm not gonna say the full name every single time, has for me, because it feels like this weird science experiment. It sometimes feels like I'm watching Steins Gate, but at the same time I'm watching a romance anime that is a slice of life, and depending on the episode, I might never know what it's gonna be, but either way it does things really well. And that's something that I really enjoyed about Rascal this season. It's the fact that you can see certain issues and you saw them in a different light, especially because a lot of the issues are things that you get once you've left high school, and they're more mature issues that people could get that kind of just left you watching every single episode thinking about yourself and how you perceive yourself and whether someone else perceives themselves in a certain way. And it makes you want to follow these characters as they deal with more mature issues, the educational issues, the thing of wanting to go to certain varsities or make an impact, want to be seen, but also sometimes the negatives that can happen when you join a setting of a varsity or a more mature place where, honestly speaking, no one really cares about you. It's really just everyone for themselves. In terms of the negatives, sometimes it kind of can get in its own way. There's a lot of information, you need to pay attention, and it's one of those anime where if you miss something, you have to go back and listen, because if you don't, you're gonna be lost. And this is something that I see very positively in terms of this anime, because it expresses itself and it really talks a lot. But also on the other side, I see it as a negative because sometimes it talks a lot. The thing that you'll notice about some of these anime is that some of their strengths are arguably their biggest weaknesses. But in terms of Rascal, I think that the negative is really the fact that it's very verbose, and sometimes it borderline feels like you are watching Steins Gate and you're not even sure how this relates to romance anymore. But the one thing that I will say about this anime is that when it clicks and you're in the loop, I don't know how to explain it, but you get into a flow and it just makes everything hit. And that is why for me it's number 2 for me.
Nice.
And last is the fragrant flower that blooms. Now, don't really focus too much on the ordering because, like I said, they're all good. It just depends on what you like. I'm gonna start off with the negative when it comes to this anime. This was the anime for me that I found to be the most simple, because there's a very Romeo and Juliet sort of vibe about this anime. And it didn't correlate to me because it seemed to be ticking every sort of romantic cliche that you could get. Oh, they're in different schools and it might be a problem if people find out. And for someone like me, that did not matter, but it was a big deal. The main character, specifically the guy, feels that he's apparently ugly or scary, and he's not. He's just a dude who's tall, has piercings, and blonde hair. Now, I don't know in Japan, does that mean you're ugly? But based on what I saw, he doesn't look that way. But this whole vibe that he's sort of misunderstood, he's dark, he's menacing, but then the whole kick is that he's this lovable, sweet guy. was kind of like, I've seen that before, and as a romance anime fan, you see that trope quite a bit, because then the other MC, who is his love interest, is just this fun-loving small person. That whole big and small person dynamic is a very common thing, but also she's the one who doesn't judge him for being a meanie or a scary guy, and also she's more expressive in terms of just how she views him. So you have this story where it's like, apparently they shouldn't be together because their schools don't like each other, but at the same time the guy is scary and the girl is sweet and she's smart, and they shouldn't be together, but they are, and they're learning. I didn't like that, and I really struggled to get to grips with this anime because I just felt like it is borderline your textbook romance anime. But if you've watched a lot of romance anime, you're just gonna constantly see a bunch of cliches. But after some time, I kind of then realized the positives about this anime, because the thing about this anime for me that eventually helped me kind of get to grips with it was that I was able to finally just take a step back and look at the romance anime for what it was. I found that maybe I needed to look more and understand the simplicity of the anime. The fact that this anime really incorporates not judging people based on appearance, but also being able to communicate with each other, express yourself, but not let circumstances and certain things get in the way of love or just relationships, because this anime does also have situations where friends have issues and you follow them trying to make up, and they're in their own world, and you see the ego aspect of humans. It has that. And once I was able to sit back and really look at that, I realized that this anime does all of the simple things really, really well. It was teaching me and kind of refreshing my whole ideology on the simplicity of romance. And I think that for a lot of people, but I'll speak for myself, I think that this is just probably the most feel-good, most get-to-the-point romance anime that you can get. It's just about two characters who kind of are from different worlds trying to be together. And I think that as a romance fan, sometimes when you've watched too much, you can find stories like this to be too simple. But in actuality, you need some of these things. You need a bit of a refresher course into the simplicity, but also the genuine pureness of what romance can be at times. And I think that The Fragrant Flower That Blooms With Dignity, that is the last time you'll hear me say that fully, is one of the anime that actually really focused on this. And at the end of it, it was probably the most purest romance anime of this season. And by the end of it, I think that this is going to be a very interesting season in terms of deciding which one is the best for the season. And side note, I'm done giving the positive and negative of all of them. I could talk about Rent-A-Girlfriend, but ass! It really was a season that gave you options, but also not only just spoke to just the general public, but to you as a romance anime consumer. You didn't necessarily have to love the anime because it was the only anime. This season we were given options, and I think that this shows the strength within romance anime, but also these three anime, in that there are choices, and depending on the person, one anime might lose out on being the best because of just the preference. Ultimately, when it comes to romance, that is one of the most important aspects. What do you enjoy about romance the most? What do you look for in romance? And for me, you got a little bit about what I like and what I look for, and that's why you have the order. But the cool thing is that none of the shows were bad, but ultimately it's about the choices and who you are as a person. And I think that this season really speaks to the romance anime fans. It's a season in which ultimately who you are will decide what's best for you. And I love that.